I imagine that if the motion we had here tonight was Christianity is a religion of peace, we get to the Q&A, perhaps even before, and somebody would say, if the other side were arguing for that, somebody would say, what about the Crusades? What about that? And then there'd be some other clever clogs who'd say, what about that Florida pastor the other week? That was a nasty business. That's Christianity for you. If we'd had tonight, Judaism is a religion of peace, the other side were trying to argue that. Sure as anything. There'd be people popping up in the hall tonight saying, oh, there's this bit in one of the Old Testament books, really, really bad. All sorts of massacres going on. Why don't you talk about that? There might even be people trying to say that, the argument that Judaism was a religion of peace couldn't be argued because people would say, look at what Israel is doing, and isn't that a direct response, and so on. So let's not have a debate about Islam and whether or not Islam is a religion of peace without talking about the facts to do with Islam. It's an absurd situation we're in, where nothing that anyone does whilst being Muslim is any responsibility of Islam's. Yet anything anyone does whilst being a Christian or a Jew is responsibility of all Christians, all Jews. Let's make this as straightforward as I can. Take the categorization that eminent scholars like Bernard Lewis, Ibn Waraq have made. Let's say Islam is a very, very complex thing. And the best way I can do this in the very short time I have is say you have three Islams. Islam 1, 2, and 3. Islam 1, the Koran and the life of Muhammad and the Hadith. Islam 2, the tradition of the Sharia. Islam 3, what Muslims do now. The first of those things, Islam, the Koran and so on, is bad. It is bad. There is a lot of violence in it. And what's worse, the peaceful verses are superseded by the violent verses. The violent verses also, sadly, are more numerous in number. Then you've got the life of Muhammad. Again, a bad man. A very bad man, it has to be said. Not a great role model, if you look at it. Takes child brides, abuses a small girl, multiple wives, himself a warrior, himself a war criminal, himself beheads Jews. This, I would have thought, would be a signal of not great peacefulness. Then you've got the tradition of the Sharia. Again, not great peacefulness. Still, no schools of Sharia that people in this hall would want to submit to. And thirdly, what Muslims do now. Thankfully, there is some hope in that one. Because most Muslims, thank goodness, I almost said thank God, but old habits die hard. Most Muslims don't do what those texts say, because they exercise their judgment as moral beings without having to refer to defunct holy books. Now, the problem is that Islam is an unstable component, as a religion, an unstable component. 1,000 years ago, the Mu'tazilites tried to reform the religion. They were wiped out. The fact is that Islam is many things, many, many things. But to say it's a religion of peace is nonsense. It's to ignore reality. It's to ignore very difficult but necessary facts, not paradigms, but facts. To say that Islam is a religion of peace is to say something based entirely on hope. It's to elevate a hope into truth. And I hope, as you all know, history teaches us that's a very bad thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smart. And that concludes round one of this Intelligence Squared U.S. debate.